Hey friends, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Angela. Today I am showing you 2 different ways to make a circle shelf. A few months ago, my son's grandma had asked me if I could make her a circle shelf, and I have been trying to figure out how to create a circle out of wood. So stick around and see if I succeeded, or was it a big fat fail? Let's get started. For this circle shelf, I'm gonna be using a I think this is a 1x4. Yes, a 1x4. This is actually a 1x3.5, and then it's 8.5 feet long. And I'm gonna cut this down into smaller pieces. So I'm gonna cut them down into about, I think, 4-inch sections. And then from there, we are going to taper the sides of each 4-inch piece so that we can put it together, and it's going to create as close to a circle as we can get. I'm hoping that the 4 inches isn't too long, because the wider I have each piece of wood, it's gonna create more of like edges instead of kind of a curve. So that's the goal. I've never done this. I'm gonna cut out 16 of these pieces, 15 more to go. And this is a little trick that I do to get them all the same size. Instead of like constantly drawing a line, you match them up on the line, on the end right here. Bring down your saw. Don't make it touch the wood though. Don't make it touch the board. You just want to lift it up a little bit to slide it until you hit that top piece. Then bring your blade down all the way to hold it in place. Then I can remove that and make my cut. Now my pieces are going to be the exact same size. Perfect cut. All of my wood now. Next I'm going to, I don't know how well you can see this, but next I'm going to miter the cut. I'm going to put this to an 11.25 degree angle. And that's what we're gonna cut all of the edges at. So just cut that little sliver off. You can see one side is thinner, one side is a little bit thicker. And then it just made the slightest little angle in our wood. And we're gonna do this on both sides of every piece. Once I had all 16 pieces cut to the 11.25 degree angle, I brought them inside to glue together. Laying them out in a line, I can see how long it is, and I'm going to get a piece of painter's tape that's a little bit longer than the length of the wood pieces. I did start with the blue painter's tape, but this roll is really old and it was not sticking to the wood, so I switched it out for my green frog tape. The tape is going to make creating the circle super easy. Next, you take each piece of wood and place them on the tape, making sure the edges are touching. And then using wood glue, add a line of glue in between each piece of wood. And Mr. Sarge had to make sure the glue was nice and safe and okay to work with. Next, start with one end and start rolling the wood to form the circle. You want to make sure each angle is lining up as best as it can. This is also why you want to cut the tape a little bit longer so you can wrap it around and make sure the circle will hold its shape for the glue to dry. It was very difficult to make sure I cut these at the 11.25 degrees with how close the cut lines are on my saw. So the circle is ever so slightly off, and it gave me some trouble closing it. There is a gap in here, which I figured I could just fill in later with some wood filler, but I wiped away any of the glue that was dripping out and let the whole thing dry overnight. Here you can see the gap a little bit better. I took all of the tape off, and then using my wood filler, I added it into the crack to help close this off. Once the wood filler dried, I took my orbital sander with an 80 grit sandpaper and smoothed out the wood. This sander is also going to knock down all of the harsh corners a bit and give a more rounded look, and I sanded over all of the seams. Hopefully you can see how this section looks more rounded compared to the others. I finished sanding all the way around the circle. This project requires a ton of sanding. After I sanded down all of the outside, I went back in with wood filler to fill in any gaps that were created between each piece of wood. And I added wood filler to the inside seams of the circle as well. Let that dry and then, you guessed it, sand it again. This time I used my palm sander, which is a little less aggressive, and a 220 grit paper. Okay, next to get the inside portion, so to get all of this on the inside of the shelf, I'm going to use my Dremel with a little like sanding wheel on it, or sanding drum on it. I don't know how well this is going to work because I don't want to like take away too much, and the Dremel can be kind of powerful. So I might end up having to like hand sand some of it, but I'm trying to at least get the big portions and maybe just like smooth it out a little bit more so that like the inside edges aren't as harsh, kind of like the outside where I like smoothed this down. But it's a little harder to do that by hand. So we'll see how the Dremel does with this one. Well, I don't know what I did there. I don't even know what happened. It literally just flew right off. This is a brand new kit. Like I just opened it. Everything was already attached together for me, so I don't know. I don't know what just happened. But I didn't get very far at all. You can see I literally only got, and I can't really get into the center because it doesn't really reach that far, but I only got 2 little sections and then started this one and it just like flew completely off. Yeah, let me try to find where that went. So I don't know where that bit went. Anyways, I went back to my actual Dremel, the smaller one. I think it wasn't tightened enough, and that was my mistake for thinking it was tightened all the way when it was brand new. But you can see, I hope that you can pick this up. The Dremel is kind of leaving more scratches in the wood because it's so powerful. So I'm gonna get all of the wood filler off, then go back and hand sand it to smooth it all out. Hand sanding really did not work. The Dremel left too deep of grooves, which I knew it would do that. I should have hand sanded the entire inside to begin with, but I went in with my palm sander, holding it at an angle to cover as much of the surface as I could get. And now I need to cut the angle on my shelf so that it is going to fit inside of here. I don't have this cut down correctly yet, but so that it's going to fit down inside of here and then rest nicely against the angle. So I did some trial and error on a scrap piece of wood and found that the degrees that I need is 20 degrees. So I need a 20-degree angle. I'm gonna set my miter saw to 20, and then I'm gonna cut one side of my shelf. Now this should fit real nice inside of my shelf there. Perfect. Now I just need to glue this in. So I'm debating if I also want to have a vertical shelf, but I think it needs a little more design to it than just the one shelf. I cut down another piece of wood, did my 20-degree angle so that it can sit in here. I'm gonna have it sit like right there, but then I need to know where I need to cut it down for this shelf because I think I'm gonna cut it into 2 pieces. I think that's going to be easier for me to put this together. So I need to figure out what the spacing is. 9, I'm gonna cut to 9 1/4. I think that's gonna be a smidge too tall, but we can always cut it down a little bit further if we need to. Ooh, look at that. It's like perfect. Now we need to do the smaller piece. So I'm gonna cut my angle again first, and then we'll cut it down to size. See, I have all of my parts. Now I just need to glue everything in place. But I just wanna mark where I want this board sitting, so when I add the glue and put it back on, I don't have to try and find that same spot. I did make sure the shelf was level lengthwise, but forgot to check the width and make sure it was also level that way. This caused an issue when trying to add in the vertical boards, and I had to take the shelf off and re-glue it. After the pieces were glued in and dried, I added more wood filler to the seams of the shelves just to fill in any gaps where they didn't perfectly fit together. I let that dry and then sanded it down again. I told you guys, there is a lot of sanding in this project. Finally, we can get to staining. I'm using my antique wax because I know stain is not going to look right with all of the wood filler, but I watered it down the wax to make it more of a stain, brushed it on, and then wiped it back. So you can see where there was any type of like wood glue. This is sanded down completely, but it never takes stain. And I know this is a wax, not a stain, but it still isn't taking it. It's rubbing right off in any of those little spots where the wood glue had seeped out onto the wood. So I went back over it with, there's some like spots in here, right here. I went back over it with the antique wax, and I'm not gonna wipe it back this time to see if it'll maybe turn out a little bit better, because I still want to be able to see that wood grain. Like I don't want to have to just paint this a solid color. So we'll see, I might have to just take some brown paints and kind of fake it and blend it in, but we'll see. I'm gonna try adding a second coat for now. Version number 2 of this shelf, I could have created this in 5 minutes or less, but originally I wanted to use only Dollar Tree supplies. Starting out, I took 2 hula hoops and I removed the plastic sticker and the beads from the inside, and to keep the hoop securely closed, I used my Starbond super glue. Here's where I ran into an issue. I thought I could use the Dollar Tree signs as the shelf. Oh, I also figured out this great way to remove the paper from these signs using a tissue blade. You just run it right under the paper and it comes off so clean and so easy. I will link this in my description box so you can see what it is if you're not familiar. Look at how clean that board is now. So I cut down the boards to fit inside the hula hoop frame, and these are pretty easy to cut with a box cutter. You just score the board a few times and snap it right off. In my mind, I thought it would be super easy to attach the board with zip ties. So I punched a hole in each corner using my Crop-A-Dile. This tool is great to have in your arsenal. It punches through a ton of materials with ease. I started attaching the boards with zip ties, and it was fine until I added the second hula hoop and realized there was nothing holding it open. The board just kept wanting to flip up and not stay in place. I did try gluing the boards in place on the hoop, but it wasn't staying. Even with my Starbond super glue, it just kept popping right off. I'm sure there's a way I could have gotten this to work, but I think it was just too thin. I spent 2 days trying to figure out different ways to make this work. I tried adding a hole in each of the hoops and then adding a dowel for the boards to sit on. This may have worked, but the boards were now cut too short to sit on the dowels. So in the end, I grabbed some scrap wood from my garage, and all I had to do was take a screw straight into the hoop and then into the wood. Easy peasy. Like I said, this could have been a 5-minute project. I did paint over the hoop and the screws with black paint, so it all blended together, and that's it for this one. Sometimes it's just better to take the more practical solution and not the cheapest.